Om Tavakatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavivireditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvigananti Bhuriyajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. For those of you following along in the book, who are on page 124, this is the chapter, Advice to Householders, and it began on page 117. This is October 16th, 1882. So we're still in the first year of M's visiting Sri Ramakrishna, and it's just at the time of the Durga Puja festival. So we'll see that generally this was a time for vacation time. For almost all of the schools would be closed, like our Christmas vacation, and work and everything. So there'll be more opportunities for devotees to come at this time. Of course, the biggest holiday celebration in Bengal, especially, is the Durga Puja. Before we start, I want to go back to one thing that we had last week, and you may remember that a certain devotee had a dream, and we're assuming that it was M. And when we went through this dream, let me see if I can find it. Thakur said, I'm thrilled to hear the story. And then he said, please be initiated by a guru as soon as possible. Okay, and I went through a long explanation, wondering why he used the word guru when he really doesn't like this term guru, and did he really mean by somebody else, this and that. And then, fortunately, our devotee Shukla pointed out to me that actually he didn't use that term. So this is why sometimes we have to go back to the original Bengali. And Sri Ramakrishna simply said, Tumi shigro mantro lo. So quickly take mantra. And of course the translators, Swami Nikhilananda, with the advice of mostly Joseph Campbell, the great expert on mythology, and the daughter of Woodrow Wilson. I don't remember her name right now. And there were others that gave him a lot of help in translation. So probably they told him, if you simply write that, people won't understand what it means to take mantra. So he expanded a little bit. Taking mantra means taking initiation from a guru, but Thakur himself didn't use that term. And it sounded odd because it gave the impression that maybe he was suggesting from somebody else other than him. So if the original Bengali doesn't create such a confusion in the mind, at least for me, because we know that Sri Ramakrishna considered M to be his very own from the very beginning. And of course we're assuming that that this is M because he hides himself. We'll see today also that when it gets to some personal things about renouncing the world and family and everything, he'll refer to himself as Mani. Mani, Mohan, these were many of the different names, usually Mashtar, Srima, different names, but when he's a little bit shy about personal things, he won't give his name, and when he's very, very shy, he'll say, Akjon Bhakto, just a devotee. So we're assuming that was him. Okay, so where did we stop? What did I say? Page 124. Okay, so now Narendra, if you remember, had come with a couple of Brahmo friends. And we remember Rakal was also there, and who else? I don't remember, but they had spent the night. I don't think all of them spent the night. At least Narendra and his friends were there. So we start out that at 9 o'clock in the morning, while the master was still sitting in his room, Manomohan arrived from Konagar with some members of his family. Now, who is this Manomohan? Manomohan Mitra. Manomohan Mitra was the father-in-law of Rakhal. Right? I tend to make mistakes with these things. In the original Bengali version, there's a very nice, it's called Bekti Porichoy. It tells who everybody is. So this Manomohan, he was from Konagar. He was a great devotee, householder devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, and he was also a cousin with Ramchandra Datta. So there was a family relationship with a lot of the devotees here. And Rakhal was his son-in-law. So he had married his young daughter to Rakhal, and he was such a great devotee that he's the one who took Rakhal to Sri Ramakrishna and eventually practically lost him as a son-in-law, but didn't seem to raise too much objection. Rakhal's father raised more objection to Rakhal staying with Sri Ramakrishna. There's a Manomohan Mitra. He was really a great devotee. So he was responsible for bringing Rakhal and Ramchandra Datta, who was related to some type of cousin or uncle or something to Narendra, Swami Vivekananda. So this little connection is there also between Balaram's family and Baburam's family, later Swami Premananda. So Manomohan arrived from Konagar with some members of his family. In answer to Sri Ramakrishna's kind inquiries, Manomohan explained that he was taking them to Calcutta. The master said, "Today is the first day of the Bengali month, an inauspicious day for undertaking a journey. I hope everything will be well with you." With a smile, he began to talk of other matters. Thakur followed some of these things. He was very particular about, especially starting any journey on a Thursday afternoon. We're modern people. We don't pay too much attention except for the fact that Thakur paid attention. We had one wonderful Swami who was the head of our Gretsch Center, Swami Atmajnananda, and I asked him once about this traveling on a Thursday, and he said, "We don't really believe in these things, but we believe in Thakur so much that we follow them to a certain extent." Swami Swananji was very particular about it, and but he had a trick. The trick was, suppose they had arranged a flight for him Thursday afternoon, he would make sure to leave his room before noon. So he started his journey before Thursday afternoon. That's how he got away with it. But he would never carry a banana with him. Yeah. This is another funny thing. I don't know why some people, we call them superstitions, but if we grow up with these things, then they have some meaning for us. When Narendra and his friends had finished bathing in the Ganges, the master said to them earnestly, "Go to the Panchavati and meditate there under the banyan tree. Shall I give you something to sit on?" Sri Ramakrishna was always anxious for the devotees to go and spend time in the Panchavati, because he himself performed so much of his austerities, his spiritual practices and disciplines in the Panchavati. And he himself planted the 5 trees there. And so he loved that place. And it's interesting because they used it for picnics as well. He didn't seem to mind. It wasn't like a temple that you couldn't eat food there and this and that. They would have little picnics and play. And the creepers grew so big you could swing on them. And Thakur would sit on it with his legs dangling out and laugh and have fun with the boys. But he also would send them there for meditation. About 10:30. So, when did they start? 9 in the morning. About 10:30, Narendra and his Brahmo friends were meditating in the Panchavati. After a while, Sri Ramakrishna came to them. M too was present. Of course, M is always present. Otherwise, we won't have any of this, except in the appendix. The Master said to the Brahmo devotees, in meditation, one must be absorbed in God. By merely floating on the surface of the water, can you reach the gems lying at the bottom of the sea? Now, this is true and good advice, general advice for everyone. But the Brahmos, Thakur felt, the Brahmos were so involved in social reform that very often they didn't seriously think about diving deep. Diving deep means that we forget the world, at least for the time being. Thakur didn't want us to be indifferent to other things, but at the time of spiritual practice, to really forget the world. And the Brahmos were so engaged in social reform, widow remarriage, and abolishing child marriage, and caste, so many different things, that he felt that they had lost that desire or tendency or understanding that one must dive deep in order to have some spiritual experience. In meditation, one must be absorbed in God. By merely floating on the surface of the water, can you reach the gems lying at the bottom of the sea? Now, we shouldn't get confused here. Thakur uses illustrations in different ways. If we say that how can we get the gems at the bottom of the sea if we're like a salt doll? Because he gives that illustration that the salt doll, by the time it gets to the bottom of the ocean to measure its depth, it's already become one with the ocean. It can't come back. This is a different context. We shouldn't think of it that way. What Thakur is saying, that within the heart, the very depth of the heart, we can have contact with the divine. The divine dwells within the heart, but we have to go deep within. In the Upanishads, we have this idea, this nihita, that is kind of hidden, like buried treasure within the heart, or in the cave of the heart. Guhayam nihita. So this idea that God is present there, but we have to go beneath the surface of the mind. Diving deep in the heart means the surface of the mind, which is full of thoughts and emotions and feelings and desires and anxieties and everything. So he's always encouraging us to go deep down. And the gems at the bottom, this will be more from the devotional point of view. There will be love and devotion and dispassion and everything. Generally, when Sri Ramakrishna says something like this, it's meant to be an introduction to a song. He has a very interesting teaching technique. He has a song in his mind and a teaching in his mind, and he'll introduce the song with a few words, and then he'll sing the song, and then he'll explain it. It's a very common feature we find in the gospel. So he starts out with this idea of floating on the surface, and then he sings the song about Mother Kali. Taking the name of Kali, dive deep down, O mind, into the heart's fathomless depths, where many a precious gem lies hid. But never believe the bed of the ocean bare of gems, if in the first few dives you fail. With firm resolve and self-control, dive deep and make your way to Mother Kali's realm. This is very important. This idea that our access point to the divine is in the heart, and it means turning within. And God may be present everywhere. God may be present within the heavens. God may be the ground of the whole universe. But we have our own access point. Direct access point is within the heart. So God dwelling within the heart is the way we can have the direct experience. If God is outside of us and separate from us, then how do we have that direct experience? Where's that access point? So when we talk about a realization of God, it's not God dwelling someplace else, looking up in the heavens. It's God dwelling within the heart. It's a very important distinction that we have between many dualistic types of teachings. Down in the ocean depths of heavenly wisdom lie the wondrous pearls of peace, O mind. And you yourself can gather them, if you but have pure love and follow the Scripture's rule. Within those ocean depths as well, 6 alligators lurk. These will be the 6 passions, sometimes called Shad Ripu, the 6 enemies. Lust, anger, and the rest. And then the footnote, the 6 passions are lust, anger, avarice, delusion, pride, and envy. There are different lists, but it's more or less that. Swimming about in search of prey. Smear yourself with the turmeric of discrimination. The very smell of it will shield you from their jaws. Upon the ocean bed lie strewn unnumbered pearls and precious gems. Plunge in, says Ramprasad, and gather up handfuls there. We've seen that of all the songs that Thakur sings, he seems to be most fond of the songs of Ramprasad. And he looked upon Ramprasad as his kind of model, his model in life, in the sense that Ramprasad's whole life was given to Mother Kali, and he had many spiritual experiences. We assume that these songs came out of the depth of his experience. He had many visions of Mother Kali, also coming to him in the form of his daughter in several times. And so we have a couple things here that are very nice, and they'll be developed, of course, that when we go deep into meditation, in the beginning especially, we find that sometimes we're churning up things that we didn't even realize were deep down within us, that were kind of hidden samskaras, that were obstacles, and we wonder why. And now I've started thinking of God, I've started meditating. Why should I sit for meditation? Some old thing will come up and I'll feel some anger. And then some little thing will come up, I'll feel some desire. Why do these things seem to attack me when I most want to forget them or not think about them? This is because we're getting closer to the bottom. And as Ramprasad says, that these alligators are lurking there. They're not always floating on the surface. Sometimes they're underground. So what do we do about that? So the song says this turmeric of discrimination. I wrote the Bengali just for fun. See what it says. Vivek holdi gaye mekhe jao. So smear your body with this turmeric. This turmeric has a very strong, acrid smell. And now, of course, turmeric is considered to be a remedy for everything. It's turmeric tea, and everyone is taking turmeric. It has wonderful medicinal qualities. But he's saying that the smell of this turmeric will drive it away. And what is it? This viveka, discrimination, discernment, this ability to distinguish one thing from another, real and unreal, important, unimportant. So he's emphasizing here this discrimination. In other places, Sri Ramakrishna will emphasize devotion. He'll give another example that living in this world is like walking across a forest full of thorns. And how do we keep the thorns from pricking our feet and bloodying them? He said, wear the shoes of devotion. So sometimes it'll be devotion, sometimes this discrimination, dispassion. Here, this is being emphasized here, that this discrimination means that we recognize all of these things belong to the mind, not to me. All of these passions that are coming up, we don't give it too much thought. We kind of dismiss them as far as possible, and remember the real goal. So it's not so simple. Dive deep and realize that there'll be obstacles that will come. We have to expect these, and we have to know how to deal with them. Narendra and his friends came down from their seats on the raised platform of the Panchavati and stood near the master. So imagine this scene. This Panchavati, there was a you have these big trees. The banyan, of course, is the biggest tree. And then there's a raised concrete platform, and it's large enough for several people to sit there at once. So they're all sitting there. They just finished meditation, and Sri Ramakrishna gives them this their highest teaching, and in his exquisite voice is singing this beautiful song of Ram Prasad. So it must have been so thrilling for them. I don't know how much Narendra's friends cared for it, but Narendra, of course, by this time, he was already caught by Sri Ramakrishna. Thakur recognized him, and he also knew that, so they already had this unbreakable bond. So Narendra and his friends came down from their seats on the raised platform of the Panchavati and stood near the master. He returned to his room with them. The master continued, "When you plunge in the water of the ocean, you may be attacked by alligators." So now he'll expand on the theme of the song. "But they won't touch you if your body is smeared with turmeric. There are no doubt 6 alligators, lust, anger, avarice, and so on, within you. And then he quotes, in the heart's fathomless depths." Because we go deeper and deeper within the heart, we don't find just some small little area. We find that we've entered into this ocean of Satchidananda. And that is the infinite. So we find that infinite, even that little space the size of a thumb, once we reach it, is infinite space. So talking about this ocean and fathomless depths. But protect yourself with the turmeric, and now he'll add something of discrimination and renunciation. So not just, he'll say viveka and vairagya. Vairagya, this has a couple of different meanings. Of course, this is a very vast subject, but for some, it gives this feeling of renouncing the world, taking to monastic life, giving up family, giving up job, position in society, and everything else. Otherwise, this vairagya can mean extreme dispassion for the world. We live in the world, we perform all of our duties, but the whole mind is given to God. Dispassion for the world and passion for God. Thakur always added that this vairagya is incomplete without anuraga. If we think of vairagya just in the negative sense, I don't care for this world. There are many people who don't care for the world. They're not necessarily spiritual people. They may be very tamasic people. So not caring for this world, but longing for something deeper, longing for some type of experience. So he's added that. So now we have viveka and vairagya. What can you achieve by mere lecturing and scholarship without discrimination and dispassion? Now, again, we have to remember the Brahmo Samaj, that they were very fond of lecturing. The Keshav was a great lecturer. Lecturing was not really something that was a very classical type of teaching. In India, normally, the guru and disciple, there would be some private conversation or maybe some small group, but this public platform lecturing was something that the Brahmos did. It's something that the British, of course, introduced, and it was very popular in Calcutta. There were others also who did it at that time. And of course we do, we also do it. But at that time, it was something that Thakur thought was kind of curious, to put a signboard out and announce there'll be a lecture at a certain time and everything. He kind of laughed at that a little bit. So he's saying, what can you achieve by mere lecturing and scholarship without discrimination and dispassion? He really felt, Thakur felt, that unless one had this badge of authority, that unless one had achieved something, had some level of realization, that even a beautiful lecture won't have the force of personality and the force of realization behind it, and won't be of much use. Now, Thakur says, God alone is real and all else is unreal. God alone is substance and all else is non-entity. That is discrimination. Now, this is one of my not pet peeves exactly, but one of the things that I find most interesting, this idea of the unreality of the world. this idea of the unreality of the world. And I always like to look at the translation, because now we have God alone is real and all else is unreal. Now, what does Thakur actually say? Isho Shoto Ashob Onito. Okay, this is generally, so this translation is a little bit misleading. I don't want to criticize the translation because it's a beautiful translation, and I think Swami Nikhilanandi did a wonderful job. But I like to make this little distinction that Thakur very, very rarely said, which is the classic statement of Advaita Vedanta, Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya. Very, very rarely did he use this word mithya, which has this connotation of unreality, or like a dream, or imaginary even. And this wasn't Thakur's attitude. I won't say that he didn't believe that Thakur didn't have the same understanding of truth and falsity that we have. For him, everything was a type of reaching out and trying to grasp the truth of something with his limited mind. So this is why he could see that the dualists, there was truth behind what they said, qualified non-dualists also, and the dualists, all of them were trying to describe something that is indescribable. All of them caught a bit of it. There was some truth, something helpful in all of them. None of them could do it. So for Thakur, what is the truth of Brahman? What can we say about Brahman? Nothing. Truth of Brahman is Brahman. And how do we know that? We experience it. That's all. But he had this idea of ruchi bheda, that we pick up a particular philosophical position, or we adopt a philosophical position based on what appeals to us. So he very rarely would say that this world is unreal is a bad idea. He would simply say, I don't like to call this world unreal. Very, very often we'll find that. I don't like to. He'll say, for the jnani, this world is unreal like a dream. He said, I don't like to call this that, which is his personal mood and personal attitude. Most of the time, when we expect to see this mithya, he substitutes it with anitya. That's why, and in the translation, very often you'll find it, most of the time it's translated that way. God alone is real and the world is transitory. Anitya, transitory. Now this transitory idea doesn't say one or the other. It doesn't say that whether this world is just a projection of Brahman and it has no physical reality. It says that this world is constantly changing. Now, this fact that the world is constantly changing, to me, doesn't convey what Thakur means by anitya. To me, anitya means that this life is flowing down this river of time, and second by second it's disappearing in that river of time. This sense of time, that Thakur says sometimes the time itself is Maya, that we're the ones who are temporary. This I is just is a constant flow. There's no stability to it. There's yesterday. Where is yesterday? It's gone. It exists only in our memory. Each second is just flowing down this river of time. This gives us a very good sense of what Thakur means by anitya. There's a transitory nature of our experience of the world, of us. Even if this external world, so just suppose, for example, that these chairs, tables, everything in this room don't change. Say they're permanent. 1,000 years from now, they'll be exactly the same. It doesn't change this transitory nature of experience. This life is just floating by. Thakur, he says, Dudina Jonno. This life, it has a 2 days existence. And when we look back on the past and we think, how long did it take for these past 70 years to go by? It is just like that. What took longer, the 70 years or actually 72 years? 72 years or yesterday? What took longer? Huh? We can't answer these questions because they're all floating by. And the time is swallowing up everything. The great devourer, the chapter 11 of Gita, when Arjuna asked Krishna, who are you? Who is this great being devouring everything? He said, I am time. There's all devouring time. Nothing will exist. Nothing will escape the jaws of time. It is devouring everything, second by second. So Thakur, generally he'll say anitya. Now, there's we can say actually four different groupings that he has. One is satyam, and mithya. If he's talking about the jnanis, he'll say, according to the jnani, that Brahman alone is real, the world is unreal. He'll use mithya sometimes because he's referring to their doctrine. Other times he'll say sat and asat, real and unreal, but there's asat doesn't have exactly that same connotation. It can mean manifest and unmanifest also. And at other times he'll say this vastu and avastu, bostu or vostu, vastu or vastu. So we're going to get that here. And this also, vastu means something that fits into some category of existence. That vastu, it's a real thing, that it's composed of elements, it's something that has some independent existence to it. A vastu will be the opposite of that, but it has a secondary meaning that I think was more important for Thakur and for us, that substantial and hollow. This world is a hollow. This world is like the hog plum. Thakur says the hog plum, that you have to take the skin off. It has some hard skin and it has a big pit. You have to eliminate that. There's not too much to it. There's a little bit of flesh inside that it tastes good, but it gives colic and one gets sick from it. So he says the world is like that. There's not much substance to it. And a little bit hollow. It won't satisfy. So abostu, it won't really satisfy what we want. So this is Thakur. He says, so God alone is real and all else is, and I'm going to substitute transitory because the real word that he uses is anitya. God alone is substance and all else is non-entity. This is bostu and abostu. So we can say God alone is substance, everything else is insubstantial. Will be a better translation, I think. Non-entity, he's not really saying that it doesn't exist, but insubstantial, there's no stuff to it. Everything else is just floating by, it can't really satisfy us. That is discrimination. So this is what he means by viveka. Then he says, first of all, set up God in the shrine of your heart, and then deliver lectures as much as you like. So this is to the boys that he's talking to, but also with regard to the lectures of the Brahmo Samaj. Because they, aside from Keshav and Vijay, of course, some of them, they were just good scholars. They didn't necessarily have any great depth to them. They were sincere people. They weren't bad people or anything. But Thakur said that people, they'll listen to your words and say, ha, 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 very, very nice and beautiful. Then they'll forget them the next moment. It won't leave a deep impression. What leaves a deep impression is personality. When we come into contact with these great souls that they talk about spiritual practice, and behind it is a lifetime of spiritual practice, and a lifetime of devotion, and a lifetime of doing everything as an offering to God. Their words carry a different type of meaning. We all know that. We've seen people like that. So, first of all, set up God in the shrine of your heart, and then deliver lectures as much as you like. How will the mere repetition of Brahma profit you if you are not imbued with discrimination and dispassion? Again, this is viveka vairagya. So just talking about something. Anybody can talk about Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya. We have many people who can give good lectures about how this world is really unreal, that it's imaginary like a dream, and they go about day and night doing everything. And they'll talk about this poverty of other people, that and hunger of other people. Why bother? This world is not real. And yet, in the first second that they're hungry, they'll eat something. And the first second that they're uncomfortable, they'll turn on the air conditioning. And yet these are the people saying this world is unreal, and don't get involved in the world, withdraw from the world, all of that. Thakur didn't like those types of things. Now, he's going to do the same trick. He's going to make a little phrase, and we're going to wonder why he says it, and it's going to turn out because he has a song in mind. He says, "It is the empty sound of a conch shell." Okay. Now, there's a song that Thakur was very fond of about this Podo, this Padma Lochana, this song, so he'll introduce it now. There lived in a village a young man named Padma Lochana. People used to call him Podo for short. In this village, there was a temple in a very dilapidated condition. In India, we've seen of these temples. The old ones, sometimes, I was so fascinated. I saw some of these old temples, and an actual tree grows up right in and through it. These banyan trees and other things, because they're made of a type of unbaked brick, which is really just clay, which is really soil. And things can grow in it. And it'll half destroy it, and half the bricks will still be there, and you'll see it's like a tree and a little shrine all together. It's very common in India. I was fascinated when I saw it the first time. This isn't so bad, but this will be an abandoned temple, and very often it'll be filthy. Bats will live in it. I remember seeing one temple like that. I went inside, and I looked up, and it was black. The whole thing was black. And I had no idea what it was. And then I saw one or two bats fly out. And I realized, because they sleep during the day, that they're hanging from the ceiling. There must be something that they can grab hold of. And it's sleeping. And it must have been hundreds of them. So the whole thing was covered with bats. So that means there'll be bat droppings on the floor and everything. So this is that type of temple. So in this village, there was a temple in a very dilapidated condition. It contained no image of God. Yet thankfully, they removed it. Ashwatha and other plants sprang up on the ruins of its walls. Bats lived inside, and the floor was covered with dust and droppings of the bats. The people of the village had stopped visiting the temple, of course. One day after dusk, the villagers heard the sound of a conch shell from the direction of the temple. Podo was a little bit of an eccentric. He wasn't I don't know what but anyhow. They thought perhaps someone had installed an image in the shrine and was performing the evening worship. One of them softly opened the door and saw Padma Lochana standing in a corner, blowing the conch. No image had been set up, the temple hadn't been swept or washed, and filth and dirt lay everywhere. Then he shouted to Podo. Now we get the song. So Thakur is just introducing the song. The song says, English of course, "You have set up no image here within the shrine, O fool. Blowing the conch, you simply make confusion worse confounded. Day and night 11 bats scream there incessantly." It's a long song. They only give the first few lines. So Thakur is saying that we have a tendency, of course, we don't like to think that our character is so filthy and everything as this, but what his point is that we want to install the image of God within the heart. We have to learn how to purify the heart. Then Thakur continues, "There is no use in merely making a noise if you want to establish the deity in the shrine of your heart, if you want to realize God." Now, someone may object that, well, they say that God dwells within the heart. God is present within the heart always. This, of course, is true. What we're talking about now is installing the deity within the heart means really creating an atmosphere where the divine presence, which is already there, can be worshipped and can be felt and can be seen clearly and everything. So it's not that those who don't have a pure heart don't have God dwelling within. God dwells within all beings. The saint and the sinner, the thief and the murderer, within everybody. But if we want to feel that divine presence in some tangible sense, then we have to create a space, a sacred space within the heart. So Thakur says, first of all, purify the mind. In the pure heart, God takes his seat. Now, the first time he says chitta shuddhi, this chitta shuddhi, and this other, we have different terms. There's manas for mind, sometimes hridaya for heart that they use, and we make a big distinction between pure mind and pure heart. There's no real distinction in Thakur's mind. It's all because everything is this divine space within, where the son of Brahman is reflected. So the son of Brahman is reflected in that space, and some of it will be what we call mind, some of it will be what we call heart. The distinction is that heart we think more of in terms of emotion and devotional attitudes, and mind we think more in terms of the ability to think clearly and discriminate and all of that. Otherwise, there's no big distinction. So Thakur is saying this chitta and manas, he's using these different terms. Even in Sanskrit, manas, it can mean mind, it can mean heart. And the place for it is in the heart. This is generally understood. And this is where Brahman is. Because mind and Brahman, consciousness and mind, occupy the same space, coextensive. Just as air and space, they're coextensive. They can't be in two different places. Huh? In the pure heart, God takes his seat. One cannot bring the holy image into the temple if the droppings of bats are all around. Now, the song talks about 11 bats. We don't get that. Day and night, 11 bats scream. What are these 11 bats? Are 11 organs, 5 of action, the karmendriyas, 5 of perception, jnanendriyas, and the mind. Okay, so this will be the 11. First of all, invoke the deity, and then give lectures to your heart content. First of all, dive deep. So now he's connecting the two songs together. The first one you remember, taking the name of Kali, dive deep, O mind, plunge to the bottom, and gather up the gems. Then you may do other things. What are these other things? Then if you want to give lectures, you can do that. If you want to set up some society, if you want to have some followers, you can do it if you want. Before that, you can also do it, but it won't have any great lasting effect. And it won't be good for those who want to start having some spiritual group and having followers and this and that before they've reached this state. It's not good for them either. It's not good for either side. Thakur gives a nice illustration. Sometimes there are these snakes, water snakes and other types of snakes that are not poisonous snakes, and sometimes they'll catch hold of a frog, a big frog, and the frog gets into the mouth and they're incapable of swallowing it because it's too big, and also of spitting it out. So they're stuck. And the frog is croaking. It's a terrible pain and discomfort for the frog. The snake is also unhappy. So he said it's painful for both that type of guru and that type of disciple. He said if it's a real kaloshap, if it's a real black cobra, then within 3 croaks the frog is dead. That means the ego dies. So first of all, invoke the deity, then give lectures to your heart's content. First of all, dive deep, plunge to the bottom, and gather up the gems. Then you may do other things. But nobody wants to plunge. Yeah, Thakur says sometimes everybody wants to be the guru, no one wants to be the disciple. There's a nice story that a young man came to a guru, and he said, I'd like to be your disciple. What does the disciple have to do? And he said, you'll have to, of course, keep the sacred fire going. You'll have to graze the cows. You'll have to cook the food. You'll have to clean the vessels. You'll have to do puja, on and on and on and on. And then he says, what does the guru do? And he says, the guru will do his practice, some meditation, and then give some spiritual advice. That's all. So then the young boy starts walking away, and then the guru says, I thought you wanted to be my disciple. He said, no, I decided I'd rather be a guru. So this is our situation. Nobody wants to put in the work. Nobody wants to plunge. People are without spiritual discipline and prayer, without renunciation and dispassion. They learn a few words and immediately start to deliver lectures. So a little bit of a rant against the Brahmo Samaj here. Even though he liked them, in Keshab he loved, and Vijay he loved, and some of the others also, he was very fond of them. But he said it to their face also. He told them that you won't achieve much through this. That people may praise you, how wonderful these words are, but it won't go deep into their hearts. They learn a few words and immediately start to deliver lectures. It is difficult to teach others. Only if a man gets a command from God, after realizing him, is he entitled to teach. Now, one of Thakur's favorite illustrations, which we'll get to later, but anyhow, there was a big tank, big pond, Haldar Pukur, not far from Thakur's house in Kamarpukur. And those days people didn't have bathrooms and everything, especially little kids. They would go and they would do their business right on the bank of the pond because the water was there, they could clean themselves. I remember the first time I went to Madras, now Chennai. It was Madras back then, and I thought, let me walk along the seashore where the ocean is. And I went and saw it had like a toilet there. Well, and I saw all the little kids were there. It's very nice because the water comes up and you wash yourself, and then it goes out and you leave. So they would do this on the banks of the Haldar Pukur, and the older people would come, and they would come to get water and cleaning and have bath there and wash their clothes there, and they'd be furious. And they did whatever they could do to get people to stop doing it. Finally, they went to the municipality. They went to the official people, and somebody came down and put up a sign, "Commit no nuisance." And probably underneath it said the authorities, and maybe with a fine, something like that. Next day, everything stopped. So unless there's a badge of authority, he said, no one will listen to your words. So only if a man gets a command from God, after realizing him. Now, of course, what about us? Of course, we haven't realized God, and we're giving these lectures. But we don't. Of course, this is very common. All of us, the first time we're asked to start giving lectures, the first thing we say is, but we haven't realized anything. And of course, Swamis who asked us to lecture, they know fully well. They said, you simply explain the words of Thakur and Holy Mother and Swamiji and everything. Don't feel that you're giving any type of lecture or teaching people or anything. This was M's attitude, of course, that Thakur would send these young boys to M. And sometimes they would say, what can I learn from him? He's a mere householder. Huh? And Thakur said, no, you won't hear anything but my words if you go there. And M used to say, I'm like someone who lives by the side of the river and has a pitcher, and anybody comes, I can dip it into the pitcher into the water, and I can slake their thirst with the waters. So that's what he did. Everything was, he didn't feel he himself was giving lectures. He was trying to explain Thakur's teachings. Thus conversing, the master came to the west end of the veranda. So they're on the northern veranda, at the west end of the northern veranda, away from the Ganges. M stood by his side. Sri Ramakrishna had repeated again and again that God cannot be realized without discrimination and renunciation. Now you remember in the beginning, I mentioned the two different connotations to this word, vairagya. One is becoming a monk, a sannyasin, renouncing the world. So M took it in that way a little bit. And M always felt that deep in his heart, if only he had come to Sri Ramakrishna earlier, like these young boys, and could have been a sannyasin. That was a great desire of his heart. Even after being married with children, he would have loved to have renounced the world. And in those days you could do it. Now, of course, is frowned upon. You get married and have children, you have to look after them and fulfill your obligations. But in those days, we had a handful, of course. Swami Brahmananda was one. Swami Jagadanandaji, the great Swami, who translated the Leela Prasanga into the great master, was a family man. There were others like that. So M is thinking. Sri Ramakrishna had repeated again and again that God cannot be realized without discrimination and renunciation. This made M extremely worried. He had married and was then a young man of 28, educated in college in the Western way. Having a sense of duty, he asked himself, do discrimination and dispassion mean giving up kamani kanchan? Now, my practice, and I was told to translate this as lust and gold, but here it really means giving up family life. He's asking, does this mean that I have to give up family life and all possessions? It means, do I have to really renounce everything and become a sannyasin? Is it only the sannyasins who can have God realization? And of course, this is a prevailing idea among many Orthodox people, followers of Shankaracharya and others, that there are different levels of adhikarata, who is capable of having God realization. You have to be male, you have to be Brahmin, and you have to renounce the world, the sannyas. And these will be the three main things. So, of course, Gita absolutely refutes that idea. That male, female, Shudra, Brahmin doesn't make any difference. Everyone can have God realization. Thakur also refuted that idea. But still, it's in the back of the mind. And Thakur says, of course, those who renounce everything, they get a little bit of a head start. They get a foot up. There is, of course, an advantage to that. So, having a sense of duty, he asked himself, do discrimination and dispassion mean giving up kamani kanchan, here woman and gold, family life, and all of our possessions? He was really at a loss to know what to do. M to the master. What should one do if one's wife says, you are neglecting me, I shall commit suicide? Now, neglecting means spending all of his time in spiritual practice. It doesn't mean hanging out with his friends, or going out drinking, or going to the movies and theater, anything like that. Now, this I believe, I should know this, I believe is before the son died. I'm pretty sure. M's son died, I think probably in 1884. And if anybody out there happens to remember or knows, you can let me know. And this idea of suicide was a real thing with his wife. I'll get to that in a second. But he says, M is asking, what should one do if one's wife says, you are neglecting me, I shall commit suicide? Master in a serious tone. Now don't get scared here, because he's going to say something very, very strong, and then he's going to back off. Thakur does that sometimes. He'll say something to impress something very strongly on the mind, and then say, but if this is done, then you don't have to worry about that. He'll do that here. Master in a serious tone. Give up such a wife if she proves an obstacle in the way of spiritual life. Thakur said that about parents also. He said that if parents do anything to prevent the children from following a spiritual life, don't listen to them. He said, in other things, listen to them. Obey them in every other way. And then he would give the example of Prahlad and Dhruva and other instances where the father was dead against it and the son didn't listen, something like that. So he's saying it now with the wife. Let her commit suicide or anything else she likes. It's very harsh. It doesn't sound like Thakur. And we'll find out, of course, that he wasn't like that. The wife that hampers her husband's spiritual life is an ungodly wife. Thakur had this distinction between Vidya Shakti and Avidya Shakti, those who would be helpful, and not just with the wife, in everything, though that which is helpful in spiritual life and that which is not helpful, both belong to Maya. Avidya Maya and Vidya Maya, but one is this sattvic type which helps us, and the other is the tamasic and rajasic. So now M will be shocked, because he wasn't expecting that. Maybe he was expecting to say that, oh, try to explain to her this and that I still love you and everything. But he didn't get that answer. So immersed in deep thought, M stood leaning against the wall. Narendra and the other devotees remained silent a few minutes. They were probably also shocked and thought, how can he say these things? And what must M be thinking? The master exchanged several words with them. He's letting it sink into M's mind. How important it is not to give up spiritual practice and spiritual life because of what other people say and think. Then, suddenly going to M, he whispered in his ear, but if a man has sincere love for God, then all come under his control. The king, wicked persons, and his wife. Sincere love of God on the husband's part may eventually help the wife to lead a spiritual life. So not only is he saying that you don't have to give her up or let her commit suicide, but you'll be helping her. She'll become a partner for you. If the husband is good, then through the grace of God, the wife may also follow his example. Now, whether Thakur knew it, whether, and I don't think it happened yet, but she actually became suicidal later when the son died, and Thakur was so kind to her that M would say, can I bring my wife? And he said, yes, you bring her, come together whenever you want. Let her stay, let her live with the Holy Mother. He was so kind to her. And she became a great devotee. And we find her going on pilgrimage. Many of these pilgrimages that Holy Mother took to Vrindavan, to South India, that Nikunja Devi, is that her name? Nikunja Devi, I think so. No. What was his wife's name? I don't remember. Anyhow, she accompanied, and through Thakur's grace, through Holy Mother's company, she of course didn't commit suicide. She recovered, but it was a tremendous shock, the death of a child. Very, very sadly, later in life, they had a daughter die also. In those days, children died. And Girish Ghosh also. Many of them had to suffer through was not the least bit uncommon for children not to make it through childhood diseases and things. So many of them died. Childbirth also. This had a most soothing effect on M's worried mind. All the while he had been thinking, let her commit suicide, what can I do? M to the master, this world is a terrible place indeed. Master to the devotees. That is the reason Chaitanya said to his companion Nityananda, listen, brother, there is no hope of salvation for the worldly minded. Shuno shuno Nityananda bhai, shong shari jibet kobu gati nai. Thakur knew all of these cute little phrases and things. They're very nice things. Yeah, so that means the worldly minded. It doesn't mean householders. Thakur had so many pious householders. On another occasion, the master had said to him privately, yes, there is no hope for a worldly man. So it doesn't mean householder, worldly, shongshari lok. If he is not sincerely devoted to God, but he has nothing to fear if he remains in the world after realizing God. Thakur had he had two things in mind for M. One was that M would be the recorder of his words. That, of course, is very clear. Second thing is that M would be the example of the grihi sannyasi. someone who was a sannyasin and a householder at the same time, who had the same spirit of the sannyasi while living the householder life. Nor need a man have any fear whatever of the world if he attains sincere devotion by practicing spiritual discipline now and then in solitude. And of course, M did this. He would go and he would live at a school just by himself, or he would even stay outside. He spent a lot of time living alone. Chaitanya had several householders among his devotees, but they were householders in name only, for they lived unattached to the world. It was noon, the worship was over, and food offerings had been made in the temple. The doors of the temple were shut. Sri Ramakrishna sat down for his meal, and Narendra and the other devotees partook of the food offerings from the temple. And this is the end of that day. And we'll start next week with, this is page 126, Sunday, October 22nd, 1882, which is the last day, the day of the immersion, the Vijaya Dashami day of Durga Puja. So, thank you all for joining us in the class. I'm saying this morning, but it's tonight, huh? Class will be tonight. Okay, we'll have our closing prayer. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanvakam Bhathur Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshimhedyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto all.